This video picks up where the previous one left off. I'll continue discussing non-destructive editing techniques. Our next task is to blur out the foreground. If you try the blur tool, you'll see that it's not available. This is a good thing because the brush engine tools directly manipulate the pixel data, and this is not allowed in a smart object. So we'll have to meet this challenge in another way. Go up to the Filter menu and choose Blur, Tilt Shift. The way that this interface works is it starts blurring at the solid line, and then the blur ramps up as it approaches the dashed line, at which point it becomes the full blur. Let's drag this solid bar up and out of the way because we don't want to blur the tower or the sky. Down below, let's drag this solid line down to about eye height and click OK. Now there's something wrong because we don't see the blur on screen. This is due to the fact that the smart filters are masked. They're only showing up in these white areas. Drag Blur Gallery down below into the lower layer. We're starting to see some of its effect. However, we don't want it to be underneath Reduce Noise because noise will be getting rid of some of the blur. So drag this above Reduce Noise in this list. But we still haven't solved the problem. To debug this issue, let's turn off this layer above. Now we can see the blur. Perhaps it's too great. Let's double-click on Blur Gallery and tone down the blur by dragging this slider. You can also do that here. I think about an 8-pixel blur is sufficient here. Click OK. So that looks good, except that we lose the effect of Smart Sharpen above. Turn this layer back on and select it. The problem comes because this layer is set to Lighten Blend Mode, so the lighter pixels on this layer show up, and the pixels that are lighter down below get hidden. What we need to do is obscure some of this layer. We can do that with a layer mask. Simply click Add Layer Mask down here, and you'll get a blank white mask. We could paint on this mask in black to hide part of this layer, or better still, we could use a gradient to make a smooth transition. Choose the Gradient tool, and then open the picker and select Foreground to Background. Drag the gradient down here, starting in the archway and going down a bit. This is actually the opposite effect of what I want. I'll press Command-I to invert the mask. On the PC, you would press Control-I. Now the black portion is at the bottom of the mask, and this is hiding the bottom part of this layer, and thus revealing the layer underneath. So the problem is solved. Our next task is to darken the sky. It's distracting to have such a bright sky. Double-click on this layer's thumbnail to access what's inside of its smart object. Here we see the original brightness contrast adjustment layer. So what's happening here is we're brightening the entire image. I don't want to brighten the sky though. So let's paint on this mask in black. Use the paintbrush tool and paint over the sky. You don't have to do a perfect job. Just a rough paint over will do. If you'd like to see the effect, you can Option-click on the layer mask, and you can see the contents of that mask. Now up here, the opacity was set to 50%. I'm going to increase that to 100 and paint over it again. This will completely hide these areas. Then press Option on the Mac or Alt on the PC and click the layer mask thumbnail again to toggle it off. So we're only brightening the building and piazza down below. I'd actually like to darken the sky though. So to do this, go Layer, New, Layer via Copy, and then invert the mask on this layer. Press Command-I on the Mac or Control-I on the PC, and then double-click on this icon and decrease the brightness of the sky. In this way, we have independent control for the sky and for the rest of the image. Close the PSB file and save. This change is carried through into the smart object. Finally, let's increase the saturation of a portion of the image. Target the top layer and then assign a vibrance adjustment layer. Increase vibrance all the way to 100%. And that looks good in some areas, but it's overblown in others. I like the effect in the sky though. To hide some of this effect, we simply need to paint on the mask in black. Paint over some of the building, but decrease the opacity so that you're painting in gray. So you're increasing the vibrance there a little bit, but it's not overblown. So there you have it, a number of non-destructive editing techniques that you can use to manipulate your photos without harming the actual pixel data.